name is Ray and you're watching Ray Books. Today's video is going to be the 15th installment in my currently checked out series. If you are new to my channel and have never seen any of my currently checked out videos before, essentially the purpose of this series is to raise awareness about the different types of resources that public libraries provide. I live in San Francisco, so the San Francisco Public Library is the library system that I use the most often. However, I also use other library systems throughout the state of California. At the end of each video, I'll be giving you guys a price tally of how much money I saved by utilizing the resources available to me through my local public libraries. So before I get into the books and the resources that I've used between November 22nd and November 28th, I do want to apologize for how late this video is. I had a 3-day weekend for the first time in a really long time, and I absolutely did not want to do anything during those 3 days. I usually work 6 days a week. I have 2 jobs. One is as a disaster service worker and the other is as a part-time reference librarian. So my days they're pretty booked, and it's a weird combination of things to be doing. So when I had 3 days off in a row, I wanted to do nothing but read, hang out with my husband, and sleep as much as possible. So that is exactly what I did. So as a result, this video is delayed. I'm not sorry that I took the 3-day break, but I am sorry that I didn't plan better in ways of how to make sure this video actually got up last Sunday and not, hopefully, when you're watching this, it is Friday, December 3rd. So fingers crossed all goes as planned. And now, without further babbling, let's just get into the books that I have currently checked out. The first book that I have checked out this week is The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Cho, and I checked this one out from the San Francisco Public Library. I think I came across this one because I was either looking for something similar to The Empress of Salt and Fortune, or because I was on another novella keyword search. I swear y'all, I am loving novellas. I am loving reading them in between novels because it's just like it's a nice break, and it's like nice to read something short so you have like another book that you finished and you just feel good about yourself. So I don't know, I'm really loving novellas, and the cover on this one is absolutely beautiful. I am 100% sure that is the first thing that caught my eye, was definitely the cover. And the synopsis is also pretty interesting. Basically, this is supposedly about a votary and an eclectic group of thieves who team up to protect some sort of sacred object. And I really do love a good eclectic group of thieves storyline. The second book that I have checked out this week is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, and I checked this one out from the Marinnet library system. The reason why I picked this one up is because of one of you lovely people. In my thoughts on Ring Shout video, I asked a question, and it was, what is your favorite horror author? And you guys gave me some pretty solid, good favorite horror authors. But the one that stood out the most was from a Rabbit, and she mentioned Shirley Jackson. I had never heard anything about Shirley Jackson before, so I was like, you know what, let me see what Shirley Jackson's about. So I did what any sane person would, and I Googled her, and I found out that she lived in San Francisco. And I have a thing for writers who live in San Francisco. I live in San Francisco, and I always like seeing if I could tell that they're kind of San Francisco-y based on their writing style. Anywho, in my Google search, I came across a really interesting article in the New Yorker. I think it was called Haunted Houses or something along those lines. And it was basically a review of an autobiography by a woman named, a biography of Shirley Jackson by a woman named Ruth Franklin. And the article was really interesting. There is so much going on in Shirley Jackson's life, and apparently she turned a lot of her inner trauma and her own experiences of like anxiety and depression into her horror novels. So I decided I might as well start with The Haunting of Hill House. It's also a series on Netflix, which I eventually plan on watching once I finish the book. And that's pretty much the game plan. All I know about the book is that there is a scholar of the occult, and he decides to go to Hill House with a trio of individuals who all have varying degrees of either connection to the house or connection to paranormal experiences. It sounds like a good book, and I'm really excited to see how Shirley Jackson writes and to see if I'm going to be interested in reading more of her other works. The third book that I have checked out is Storm of Locust by Rebecca Roanhorse, and this is checked out from the San Francisco Public Library. I remember that I read the first book in the Sixth World series, I believe it's called, back in 2019, and I really don't remember how it ended, which makes me a little bit nervous to read this second installment in the series. However, what I do remember from the first one is that I absolutely loved the main character, Maggie. She is a complete and total monster hunting badass. And I also loved how Navajo stories and myths and traditions were woven throughout the entire novel. I thought that was absolutely stunning and absolutely beautifully done. And I remember being incredibly excited that it was going to be a series. And then also I felt like I was waiting forever for the second book in the series to come out, and then I kind of forgot about it. But I have the second book now, and I am looking forward to it. From what I understand, this book takes place 4 weeks after the events of the first novel and feature body devourers, a cult led by someone called the White Lotus, I think it might be a deity or some type of god, and newborn baby casino gods, which was probably one of my absolute favorite trio of words. So I am really looking forward to reading the second book in the series, and eventually I do want to get around to reading her novel Black Sun, because that does look super good as well. The fourth book that I currently have checked out is Afropessimism by Frank B. Wilderson III, and I checked this one out from the Marinette library system. Sometimes I do like a good nonfiction book, and I came across this one as I was browsing through the National Book Awards long list of 2020, I believe. I hope that's what I was browsing through. And essentially this one caught my eye and seemed so incredibly interesting. Wilderson has this thesis that the Black experience can only ever be viewed through the perpetual cycle of slavery. And while this is not a school of thought that I myself prescribe to, I do think it is an interesting school of thought and one that should be further looked at and further examined. Another thing that really caught my interest about this book is the fact that there are also a bunch of very good, at least according to the internets, autobiographical portions scattered throughout. So I'm really interested to see how Wilderson equates his Black experience with his thesis, and if he uses his experience to support his thesis or not. The fifth book that I currently have checked out is The Travelers by Regina Porter, and this is checked out through the Marinette library system. This was a good old serendipitous book find, and I absolutely love that for me. Basically, I was pulling the holds at my librarian job, and this one just happened to be right next to a book that I was pulling for another patron, and the covers on the spine were absolutely captivating, and I felt like I absolutely needed to read it. Briefly skimmed the synopsis, decided, you know what, I'm gonna bring this one upstairs for myself. Also checked the hold list to make sure no one else had requested it, and then put it on my cart to bring it upstairs with me. I don't really know how to explain this book except that it follows two families, I believe, and the people in which the descendants of these two families encounter. Their synopsis promises that there's going to be two adult half-brothers who meet for the first time in a crayon factory, a black lesbian in 1970s Berlin who is having the absolute time of her life, and an interracial romance. And I do love a pretty good interracial romance. It sounds like it's going to be an interesting and a funny story, and I'm really looking forward to diving into it. And the last book that I currently have checked out is Memorial by Brian Washington, and this one is also checked out from the Marin.net library system. I remember reading about this one in the New York Times back in October while I had a free couple of moments at the reference desk at my other job. What I do try to keep track of at my other job is the books that are in the New York Times bestsellers and the books that are occasionally having articles written about them, just because the population that library serves, they are huge on bestsellers. They are huge on anything that appears in the New York Times. So while I'm at the reference desk there, I do usually try and make sure that I'm at least a little bit familiar with what's appearing in the New York Times. That way when someone calls with a reference question and they're like, about that book that was in the New York Times 2 weeks ago, I can at least kind of be like, ah yes, was it this one or was it this one? Which has honestly saved my butt in the library several times at this junction. Anywho, when I read the article, I thought that this book sounded absolutely fascinating, potentially sweet, and potentially really funny. It centers on a gay interracial couple living in Houston. One dude is Japanese American and he is a chef at a Mexican restaurant, and the other dude is black and works at a daycare. Essentially, they are at the point in their relationship where they are unsure if they're even really a couple anymore. And from someone who has been in at least like one super duper long relationship, that is a real thing that happens. Sometimes you just hit this point where you're like, are we just really good friends who occasionally bang, or are we actually more than just really good friends? But I thought that was an interesting thing to this book. Another really interesting component is that apparently the Japanese American's father is dying in Japan, so he flies all the way to Japan to be with his father, who he has an incredibly rocky relationship with, while his mother is flying in to hang out with him. And it's up to the black daycare working boyfriend to entertain his mother while he is off in Japan. It sounds like there is a lot of self-discovery going on in this book. It sounds like there's hopefully a lot of humor, and it just sounds like it's going to be a potentially sweet and just interesting and hopefully lighthearted read. And for the e-resources that I have utilized in the past 2 weeks, both of these e-resources are through the San Francisco Public Library. The first of these e-resources that I utilized is NoveList Plus, which is a giant database of book recommendations. NoveList Plus has honestly saved my butt so many times when it comes to creating reader advisories and recommending books based off of someone's favorite author, favorite book, favorite genre, what have you. NoveList Plus is just a good resource to have. It's a good life jacket to add to your boat. I personally really enjoy using it, even though their website does seem a little bit clunky and a little bit dated. While NoveList does say that it is primarily geared toward library workers, I really do believe that it's a resource that would be beneficial to anyone who is working with books, especially if you find yourself doing readers advisories, book lists, book recommendations, or book displays. I think it's a pretty good resource to just have in your pocket and be ready to whip out when you need to use it. Basically, I had to use NoveList Plus maybe 3 times in a week because the library that I'm working at is doing book bundles, and I think book bundles are absolutely amazing and fascinating, and I love being able to work on them. but I never really realized how hard it is to recommend books to someone based off of their favorite authors or books that they enjoyed or books that they kind of sort of liked but didn't really like but want to read something better than, which is an insane kind of recommendation to me, especially when all of those things are so far outside of my usual reading genre. And that's where I relied very heavily on NoveList Plus, because they do kind of give you recommendations based on author, they give you recommendations based on the appeal of the book, the genre, and other kind of like read-alikes, and I really do like that about NoveList Plus. Also, unfortunately, I can't give you guys an accurate price on how much NoveList Plus cost. I do know that it's one of the more expensive library databases, so you probably won't see it if your library system is incredibly small or if your library service population is incredibly small. The cost of the database is based off of a library service population. The other e-resource that I used was RB Digital. I used the magazine portion of RB Digital, and essentially it is a huge digital collection of magazines that is available for digital checkout on your computer, tablet, phone, and I believe Kindle Fire. When I was trying to read that Shirley Jackson article that I mentioned when I was talking about The Haunting of Hill House, I hit that cursed paywall, and I remembered that SFPL through RB Digital has access to the New Yorker. So hit up RB Digital, found the New Yorker, and finally found the magazine that I was looking for and was able to read the article. One of the things that I don't like about RB Digital is that there is no way to search for a specific article or a specific issue. So you actually have to like click around and figure out like, ooh, is it in this issue? Is it in this year? Is it in this offering? Which is a little bit annoying, but it is a 100% completely free service, so I can't complain too much, you know? And that is pretty much it for everything that I utilized from the public library between November 22nd and November 28th. And of course, the big question is, how much money did I save by utilizing the resources available to me through my local public library systems? And the answer is I saved $117.19. And I do want to break this down by library system just because I think it's pretty interesting. The San Francisco Public Library saved me $39.40, and the MarinNet library system saved me $77.79. And of course, this would not be a Ray of Books video without me asking you guys some questions. So what is it that you currently have checked out? If you don't have anything checked out, what are you currently reading? And the bonus question of this week is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your book recommending abilities? I would rate mine like a pretty solid like 7.5. I feel like 7.5 is a pretty accurate description of like how many people tell me like, oh, I like that book recommendation. But let me know what yours are down in the comments below. And that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. It really does help me out in the YouTube algorithm. And if you ever want to see and or hear me babble about books ever again, please hit that subscribe button. It really does mean the world to me. And I hope everyone is having a wonderful day and reading wonderful books, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.